Welcome, Father Fitzpatrick, to the new media room. This is our first interview together. It's great to have you here. So today we're going to be talking about evangelization, right, and going into new evangelization. So what is new evangelization and why should we care about it as Catholics?
That really is a great question. New evangelization has the possibility of becoming one of those obscure buzzwords that everybody hears, but nobody really knows exactly what it means or how it impacts their life. The Second Vatican Council talked about the mission of the church. In fact, what it said was that the mission of the church is to evangelize. The reason a church exists is to go outside of itself. Pope Francis echoes that a little bit when he says one of the signs of a sick church is that it's self-referential, turns in on itself. So from the documents of the Second Vatican Council, particularly Lumen Gentium, which means the light of the world, the church understands that the need is to go out, to be involved in the culture and to bring the good news into the culture. The good news is not that we bring the church to the culture. The good news is that we bring Jesus Christ to the culture. And the church is in service of the proclamation of Jesus Christ. Pope John Paul himself said that the new evangelization is not about throwing away all of the old, but rather to take the church's evangelizing message, the hope and the light of Christ, with a new ardor, with a new manner, and with a new content. So to present it to people of our time in the language that they understand, and the language they can appreciate, what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
So what does this new evangelization mean for individual Catholics living in our parish or living in our society that may be, in their workplace or in their families having to live with this culture that's faced in front of them?
It's interesting that you would use the context of a parish or the members of a parish, because if we use the methodologies that are now available to us, there are going to be people affected by what we do at St. Peter Parish who will never ever come to St. Peter Parish, not because they don't like it or they don't want to be in a church, but they just live too far from here. They live at a distance, but they're seeing what we're doing in the digital world. They're seeing what we're doing on live stream or Facebook or Instagram. So what will it mean for an individual Catholic? In part, it's going to mean every individual in this parish can have a remarkable effect beyond the boundaries of family or community or where they can personally go to do something. We can inspire people everywhere who see the simple things we do in witnessing to our relationship in Jesus Christ. What difference does it make to an individual Catholic here in this parish? We recently finished a program called Friends and Neighbors. We used what is now, I guess, old school technology. We actually picked up a phone and called people. But our effect, the effect of one person in calling 50 other people, could be way beyond what would be traditional boundaries of who can I actually talk to in a face-to-face, but maybe who I can talk to through communications technology.
Yeah, and kind of going on those lines, we kind of went over some of the methods of this new evangelization in the parish context. Can you explain a little bit the difference between, or breaking down evangelization? And the church kind of breaks it down into primary and secondary, quoting Scott Hahn's videos here. Can you explain that a little bit? What does that mean, primary and secondary evangelization?
We have a rich tradition in this archdiocese of Catholic school and Catholic education. Oftentimes in this area, the Catholic education of our young people wasn't always within a Catholic school. But a primary way of evangelizing would be to teach the faith and to present the story of Jesus Christ, to try to open the hearts of children, young people, families, those seeking a deeper relationship with Jesus through the church. That primary evangelization doesn't always have its fullest impact as a child or a young person grows into adulthood, because at a certain point they stop having a formal religious education. And unless their family or their circle of friends is deeply involved in faith, they are liable to drift a bit because the culture is a very strong force. The culture has been described as a tsunami, just an overwhelming force that sweeps up everything in front of it. And those who aren't deeply rooted in relationship with Christ and a community of faith like a church are going to find themselves swept away. So the primary evangelization, while important in setting roots and giving foundations, oftentimes gets obscured by the values of the culture. Hedonism, narcissism, rationalism, a sense of individualism that doesn't see the person involved in community or the needs of others, what traditionally would be called the common good.
Yeah, and me personally, I'm one of those folks who been through religious education here at St. Peter, drifted away a little bit, and then found myself, as I matured as a Catholic man, coming back and wanting to learn more, right? I wouldn't rely on, back when I was in middle school and got my confirmation, to form my entire faith for the rest of my life. And so I think that's where secondary evangelization comes in, right? Where we mature ourselves and we see the church in a new light, in a different perception that we never thought possible before. Can you explain that as a priest and how that kind of works in families today at the parish and even in the digital space?
We built a pretty fabulous church building so that we would be anchored and have a strong foundation in a very public way, that there is a church here, there is a sacred space here. But we would really fall short of evangelizing in that secondary sense if we expected everybody to decide how wonderful it would be to come into our space. It is a wonderful space. But we are more church when we are ministering outside of this space. And so the structure of our parish leadership centers on ways that we've identified we can have an impact in the culture through mission, through welcome, through worship, obviously. And now more and more through electronic and digital means. We've developed, as a result of this COVID-19 and coronavirus pandemic time, a tremendous way to find a new approach to reaching out to people who for quite some time were not allowed to come here and even now might be hesitant to come into a church. But that's also opened us up to bring charitable outreach, to bring a sense of belonging and welcome to people who really are living in a world, I think if we're frank about it, is very confusing. It seems to have an increased amount of violence, where political leaders are unsure of the direction that we should go in, and people are unsure whether they trust politicians, the media, and even church leadership. In a world where there's so much lack of trust and hostility, a relationship with Jesus Christ can draw people in to understand, if I may talk a little bit about maybe three major ways that people are troubled. Can wrongs be righted? Is there a way to have real justice and peace? For a person, on a personal level, to say, can I be forgiven? Is the world a place where I'm going to be welcome? Will people accept me as I am? Want to understand me as the person as I am? Maybe on a personal level of saying, am I lovable? And the third, why is there so much suffering? Why is it that there seems to be no solution to suffering? And ultimately, why do the people who I love die? And on a personal level, facing my own mortality, why am I here? What is my purpose? And knowing that I'm going to die, what should I do in my life? A secondary evangelization that takes into account these major questions of our culture and seeks to respond to them in ways that involve people, I think can be very, very effective. If we stay with a model that says, well, we will just keep teaching the truth and eventually you'll come to accept what we believe is the exact backwards way to go. The goal is not to make them like us. The goal is to be in the world and raise the whole culture so that Christ's light shining on it can transform lives.
Wow. That's so deep, right? And when you think about it, what are ways that you see that happening as we speak? right? How are we living in the culture and raising it up so that Jesus' light, the light of Christ, right, can shine on the culture?
Right, there's no magic answer to that, because Jesus' method was different from giving simple answers. What he chose to do was to form through relationships a community of disciples. He chose to accompany initially 12 pretty unusual characters that were later called the apostles, and the Bible tells us then there were 72 disciples and then a larger group than that. And in this method that was used by Jesus, building relationships over time and investing in people is what ultimately brought his mission to life. It's not a short term and not a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, but rather a decision to say each individual is important. Each person with whom I come in contact is a valuable and dignified child of God. And my role, if I'm going to really be a follower of Jesus Christ, is to build healthy friendships and relationships that enable people to draw closer to the Lord. How can I do that practically? I think it's as simple sometimes as supporting someone when they are sick, reaching out to people who are in need of food, finding ways that what I believe is important because God has revealed it to me, that I can begin to live that out and draw others into the kind of relationship with Christ that I have. It begs the question, though, and it makes a big implication, that I've walked with Christ myself a while.
At St. Peter and throughout the world in the Catholic Church, there's this huge movement to empower lay individuals, right? Lay leadership in the church to do great things, right? It's not only on the clergy, as sometimes we traditionally thought. What does that look like now in the 21st century?
Well, it's both scary and exciting, right? In the hope that the church would raise up the culture, what I think we experience a lot is that the culture has impacted on the church. And so frequently there are divisions and factions, there's selfishness and self-will. There's a lack of an understanding of even how to be collaborative and to work well in a way that enables all persons to share in decision-making and leadership. So lay people, which is the vast majority of the church, and by lay people I mean those who have never received the sacrament of holy orders, they're not deacons, priests, or bishops. Lay people are the vast majority of the church. There are very few priests, and fewer every day. Fewer still are the number of bishops. And deacons are a great asset to any parish and to the church, but their primary vocation is not to the church, it's to their family and to their jobs. Here's what empowers lay people. Here's where the source of their strength comes from. They've been baptized. Because they're baptized, we can say very clearly that they're called by name into the service of the gospel. They're called by name to be brothers and sisters of the Lord Jesus Christ. They have been anointed and set apart. In fact, they're sacred persons. That word sacred sounds like a theology buzzword, but what sacred means is they've been set aside for a purpose. They have a purpose. They are enlivened by Christ's grace to live in such a way that they proclaim the gospel by their very lifestyle. We're at just the beginning of understanding the impact of that in the whole church and even in this parish. Although I can say unequivocally that we could not be a parish right now at this time in history without committed lay persons, baptized persons who have embraced and are embracing in ever deepening ways their vocation as the dignified brothers and sisters of Christ, children of God. They've been filled with the gifts of the Holy Spirit. As lay people come to understand and accept their baptismal vocation, the church is going to move forward tremendously.
Speaking of lay leadership, right,
yes,
in the context of the media ministry here at St. Peter, right, we're moving, and COVID-19 sort of progressed our advancements in technology and are adapting to this changing world, right? So what does the new evangelization movement in the church that has been here for a while now look like in the context of lay leadership and media ministry in parishes?
A person in my generation remembers a dial telephone, a record player, other kinds of technology that even you're laughing at because they just don't exist anymore. The world is moving so fast in terms of communication, in terms of services, even supply chains. I mean, we've all been the victim in this COVID-19 environment of the failure of the supply chain, and we suffered the consequences of that. The generations of Catholics who are emerging now in our culture from education world and from their own family communities have such a strong sense of how digital and electronic technology are at the service of the whole world right now. It's a world everybody lives in. I think a media ministry in a parish can bring those gifts into the service of the church as it proclaims Jesus Christ. And to have people around a parish, even in terms of employment or commitment or ministry in a formal sense, makes it possible for the church to speak to the world we're in. Not to be too historical about it, but the original Gospels were written in Greek because that was the language of intellectuals and anybody who could read, and there were very few in ancient cultures who could. If they could read, they could read Greek. But as the world progressed shortly after the time of the Gospel, more and more people couldn't read Greek anymore. They could read Latin, though. And so the church adapted, and it translated the scriptures and the worship of liturgy into the language of the people. Well, Ryan, today, the language of the people is the digital world. It's the electronic world. There's very little you can do today. Start your car, open the door of your house, figure out how your refrigerator works, or operate your washing machine. It cannot be done anymore without a digital or electronic understanding. That's where the church needs to move very, very dramatically. And I would suggest that we're uniquely positioned to do that.
Yeah, and I keep thinking of the fact that this small space, right? Who knows who's watching this video, right? That are learning about the Catholic Church, and people who would have been here physically are now exposed to Catholic teaching, right? Robert Barron, Scott Hahn, Word on Fire mission, right? We see that, and it's amazing to see how the church is evolving in front of our eyes. I always joke with you, COVID-19 kind of made us progress 10 years in about 3 months, right?
It's the truth.
Yeah, and we now have this media ministry, and we see young people rising to the occasion, right, and saying, hey, I want to learn about my faith, go deeper, but also I want to be in leadership, right, and see how things go. And me, I see that as a really great gift that we have here, but the church has an opportunity, and I think we're poised to capitalize on it. Father, I'd like to thank you for sitting down with me today. I'm sure we'll sit down again, and I hope this becomes a regular occurrence because this is what we need, and this is what new evangelization is for the church. So thank you.
And I thank you, Ryan, too, because you and others that you've surrounded yourself with have a vision that makes us better as a parish and also makes us think differently as a parish. So thank you.
Appreciate it.